is MEGAREVO and product engineer Doris, and this is G2 series single-phase hybrid inverter LCD operation guideline videos.
Tap the settings icon in the upper left corner of the screen, enter the default password 11111, and access the settings interface. The first page of the system settings is the work mode selection. The inverter is set to self-consumption mode by default, and can be used without changing the settings. PV power is prioritized to supply the load. Surplus energy is used to charge the battery, and any remaining energy is exported to the grid. When PV generation is insufficient to supply the load, the remaining required power will be drawn from the battery first. If the combined power from PV and battery still cannot meet the load demand, the system will draw power from the grid. For details, please refer to video 18 of this series of screen operation guides, grid settings video. Click the Advanced Settings button in the lower right corner. Advanced Settings is only available under the self-consumption work mode. Enter the Advanced Settings page. By default, it is disabled. Select Cell first. In this mode, the system first supplies power to the load, then exports power to the grid. Only when the grid export power setting is small, and there is still excess PV power after supplying the load and grid, the system will then charge the battery. Select BAT Charge first. In this mode, when the grid is available, the load is powered by the grid, while PV power is prioritized for battery charging. When the grid is unavailable, the system will charge the battery only after ensuring sufficient power to the load. This reduces conversion losses between AC and DC, and improves overall system efficiency. Click TOU Enable to enable time of use mode. Under self-use mode, the system can charge the battery using the grid or diesel generator, storing a certain amount of energy in the battery. Click the arrow below to enter page 2, the TOU settings interface. This page allows configuration of 6 time periods for battery charging. Within the configured time periods, choose either grid or diesel generator to charge the battery. During the TOU time of use period, when cell is set to disable, the battery only discharges to supply the load. If the configured BAT power is greater than the load power, the battery discharge power equals the load power. When cell is set to enable, the battery is allowed to sell power to the grid. If the configured BAT power is greater than the load power, the battery discharge power equals the configured BAT power, and the portion exceeding the load power is exported to the grid. Click to set battery charging power. For example, 8 kilowatts. This value must not exceed the rated power of the inverter. Click to set battery charge stop SOC. When the battery SOC reaches this value, charging stops. For example, set as 100%, meaning charging stops when the battery is full. Click Grid Power Limit to set the grid charging limit under TOU mode. For example, 5 kilowatts. Low SOC charge. When the battery remains at a low state of charge SOC for an extended period, this function forces the battery to charge when the SOC drops below the configured lower limit, preventing over-discharge and protecting the battery to extend its service life. When the battery SOC is lower than the grid discharge cutoff SOC, 01772, both PV and the grid will charge the battery, equivalent to battery priority mode. Charging continues until the battery SOC is greater than or equal to the grid charge cutoff SOC, 01773, at which point charging stops, and the system resumes the normal self-consumption operating logic. Grid limit enable, limited grid usage enable. PV power priority, load battery grid. Load supply priority, PV grid, limited battery. PV energy is prioritized for supplying the load. When PV generation is sufficient and exceeds the load demand, the surplus PV power charges the battery. When PV generation is insufficient and lower than the load demand, the load will preferentially draw power from the grid. If the grid power consumption is lower than the configured grid power limit, 0x3442, the load is powered by both PV and the grid, and the battery does not discharge. When the grid power consumption exceeds the grid power limit, the battery starts discharging to supply the load, maintaining the grid power consumption at or below the configured grid power limit. Enable the 3 buttons above, complete the grid charging limit value setting, and the 6 TOU time periods charging settings. Then, click the Send button in the lower right corner to upload the parameters to the control center. TOU mode will then take effect. Note: when the grid charging limit value and the TOU charging power value are inconsistent, the system will execute the smaller value by default. After completing the parameter settings of each page, click the Apply button at the bottom right to upload the information to the inverter control system. The inverter will then start executing the configured parameters.
Thank you for your watching. That's all for this video. Contact us if you have any other technical problems. Go to megarevo.com. See you!